Hey everybody, welcome to the second episode of HeyPoorPodcast. This is Dead Pixels. I'm here with the rest of the HeyPoor player cast. We got Burt Hopkins.
Yo.
Trevor.
What's up?
And Marius.
Hey guys.
And we're here tonight to talk about the Sega Genesis.
Oh yeah, that's the good stuff.
Yes, it is Genesis, not Mega Drive.
That's right.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
Hell yeah.
Man knows his marketing.
Genesis does. All right. So the Sega Genesis released at the Christmas in 1989. My experience actually happened to get it that Christmas with Altered Beast and John Madden Football.
Wow.
And I got to say, it blew my mind growing up with a Nintendo, just seeing those giant, chunky 16-bit sprites. It just mirrored the arcades. It was an experience unlike anything else. When did you guys get your Genesises?
Way I figured I had to get mine around 91. That was the year that Sonic came out, and it was actually bundled with the system. And I remember me and my cousins, we all got it and started trading carts almost immediately, but all of us had Sonic. So I figure it had to be around then. That was the, at least according to what I found online, that was the release time frame for it.
Right. 89 to 91.
I remember that, and I think it was a Disney game that was packed with it. I got Quackshot, and my cousins got the Mickey Mouse Enchanted Forest one. I can't remember if that was its name.
Castle of Illusion.
Castle of Illusion, that's the one.
That game was fantastic.
There's going to be a 3DS sequel to it.
I saw that. It's was it World of Illusion? No, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Yes, it's keeping the 16-bit sprite style too, so it's looking pretty good.
On the
Disney
3DS.
actually had a fantastic run of games on the Genesis. I don't know whether or not they had some kind of exclusive deal, or whether or not it was mirrored on Super Nintendo. I only had enough money and attention span to follow one console at that time. So
Yeah, fair enough. How about you, Trevor?
I actually did not get the my Sega Genesis until about 1995, I think. And by then, the PS1 was already out, and pretty much the 16-bit era was over. My parents were pretty anti-video games growing up. They didn't have the ability to say the words video games without the words "those damn" in front of it. So my first, my Genesis, I actually own it. It's the same Genesis I've had. It's a Model 1, the large one that looks... I think it's the one that looks the best out of all the models of Genesises. And
does it have the high definition graphics printed on the front? Because
yeah.
if so, that is the much better unit. Very cool.
Anyway, yeah, I had that, and for an entire year, the only game I owned for it was Sonic 1. So needless to say, I got really good at that game.
That's why you're able to pump out the videos so quickly, right?
Exactly. So yeah, that was... I'd always wanted the... Sega Genesis because I was a Sonic fan ever since I first saw, the Sonic games. I was like, wow, it's so fast, and this character is so cool. And so yeah, I've always been a Sonic fan. It's actually the only comic book that I ever got into was the Sonic the Hedgehog comic. The Archie.
Oh, they're actually still going on, aren't they?
Yeah, that's still going. I think it has like second place for the longest running comic book based on a previously licensed character. I think the only thing that has run longer is like Conan the Barbarian or something like that.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the first comic debuted in 1993, so it's almost 20 years old now.
Did you watch the cartoon?
Oh yeah, I liked the I guess
Jaleel Williams, was it?
They call it Sat-Am, the one that came on Saturday mornings.
Saturday mornings,
yeah,
right?
the good version.
I actually have the DVD that was released a couple of years ago for the entire series.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, we actually got that for my son, too. So.
Nice.
It's cool. I mean, you and my 4-year-old have the same TV habits. It's pretty rad.
nice.
Me too. It's okay.
That's about it. Over the years, I've collected, my collection stands at about 15 or so games for the Genesis. And, now that I have a capture card, I still just randomly turn on a game and play it on my computer here.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, the thing about Sonic, though, he had some stellar games, really. I mean, Sonic 2 has to be one of my favorite games of all time. But then you have, like, the real bombs, like Sonic Spinball and Sonic 3D Blast. That's like garbage. Do you?
Yeah.
The slowdown kind of makes it unplayable, I think.
I wasn't big on Spinball.
Okay, don't play it. Okay, if you play it expecting a pinball game, then yeah, just don't play it like a pinball game. It's a terrible pinball game.
Right. But an okay Sonic game.
But yeah, it's still a good Sonic game.
Cool.
And then it kind of went, the full Game Genie route when you got Sonic and Knuckles, where you could actually flip over the top of the game and cram in other Sonic titles.
Yeah.
If you crammed in the first Sonic game and pressed all 3 buttons at the same time, you could actually only play those bonus levels where you normally get the Chaos Emeralds.
Oh yeah, and you also with just random games actually have different effects for that too.
Yeah, you can
Like
you can play
some
game.
Sega games have Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are like 3,000 levels, if I'm right, of this bonus game.
Yeah, I think the only one where you have like full control over it is if you put in Sonic 1, and then you have like a hex code thing that you can put in, and you can try different hex codes to generate
more levels.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Marius? I know that you said you don't have a whole lot of experience with the Genesis.
Yeah, because I'm pretty new to the party of the Genesis. I got my Genesis as my first retro console in the year 2009. It took me 3 years, but I have now 7 games for Genesis.
Very. You got a favorite?
Yeah, Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Ah, good choice.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to say that out of all the Sonic games, that's my favorite.
The thing is, a lot of people give it a lot of flack because the levels were pretty maze-like compared to the other games in the series. It was hard to kind of breeze through them. I can't even count how many times I've run out of time in Carnival Night Zone and beat my head into a wall. It's ridiculous.
Are those the same people who complain about Sonic levels now being too linear?
Probably.
I have no comment.
Sonic 2 was probably my favorite from that franchise. I just absolutely loved the Chaos Emerald zones where you were in the half pipe and kind of running around, and just after a while, I mean, you got to be so focused on that, you'd go to sleep and you'd dream about being in the half pipe trying to get all of the rings without dying.
And then it turns into a nightmare where, you move out of the way of the stupid little spike balls and crap, but Tails is just still standing there and he loses all your rings right before you get to the checkpoint, and then you fail.
Oh my god.
Tails was like having your little brother follow you around and then, no, don't be stupid. Oh god, there went half my rings. You idiot.
Okay, so, I mean, the Genesis all around, it was a pretty great system. It introduced the arcade kind of style graphics and gameplay to the market that you'd blast processing. And it did what Nintendo didn't, what Nintendon't. And it just all around, I mean, it was definitely for a kid growing up in, the late 80s, early 90s, it was unreal. It was unlike anything else. Sega, they really got smashed in the US with the Master System. Nintendo just had this terribly malicious ploy to make sure no Master Systems were available. I mean, they embargoed retailers to make sure that they weren't going to be able to sell Sega products and and Nintendo products as well. It was one or the other. I mean, it was ruthless.
Yeah, I didn't even know about all that because, I remember it wasn't until after I got my Sega Genesis that I even heard of the Sega Master, and I'm like, what is this thing? And because I never saw it anywhere.
Yeah, well, basically what it was is the then president of Nintendo, he went to the retailers and he said, if you carry this system, we're not going to allow you to carry Nintendo games. And because of that, I mean, Nintendo being, the number one console at the time, retailers just didn't want to risk it. So
yeah,
there you have it. Now, Sega, I mean, they really tried to one-up Nintendo with putting out this much more powerful system, and they put the pressure on them, forced them to come out with the Super Nintendo, and they did a great job, I think. As a big arcade gamer, it had everything I wanted: Ninja Gaiden, Golden Axe,
but one of the
Streets
things
of
I
Rage.
remembered, one of the things I remembered with the Super Nintendo when it came out, though, is that in the States, Sega had a lead on them by like 2 years. By the time it came out, I mean, I don't know about everybody else here. I mean, on the first run for it, I remember just, it was one of those things where picking a console was kind of important. Very few households had the wherewithal to get 2 consoles.
Right.
So pretty much I only knew one kid on my street who even had a Super Nintendo, but all the rest of us had already been playing Genesis for 2 years, had pretty large libraries, were trading cartridges with each other. everybody kind of looked and went to Nintendo and said, "Mom and Dad ain't going to help me shell out that kind of money to grab that kind of thing. So I
Right.
better enjoy what I have. Maybe I'll play the new Super Mario Brothers game when I'm over at that buddy's house." But
Yeah,
that was the way it worked, at least for me.
it's kind of
Yeah, I mean,
interesting
at least-
because
No, go ahead, Trevor.
I've noticed that my generation. I was born in '85, so like the mid '80s generation. The slightly older guys. Not to make too much fun of you guys, but most of the older guys say that they enjoy the Genesis more. But most people around my age grew up more with Nintendo, and I think that's because I was only 4 when the Genesis came out, so I wasn't really quite into gaming at that time. So if you think about it, people my age were around 6, 7 whenever the Nintendo came out. So, and I think a lot of, I will say this, that I've noticed a lot more people who have a bit more nerdy tendencies seem to enjoy the Nintendo more.
I've noticed that. I do agree with that.
Well, that's probably because of the RPG titles on the Super Nintendo.
I would have to say, because you had the Final Fantasy and the
Chrono Trigger.
No, I can't really agree with that. There were plenty of great RPGs on the Genesis if you knew where to look.
Mainly the Fantasy Star.
Fantasy Star.
No, Fantasy Star is fantastic. All 4 of them. Well, not so much 3. We could do without that one. Fantasy.
The first one is unplayable without the manual.
I actually have never used the manual for the. Are you talking about Fantasy Star on the Master System?
Yeah.
I've never had any issues with it. I made it pretty far. I just have a loose cartridge. But no, Fantasy Stars 2, 3, and 4. 3 was okay. 4 was phenomenal. I think it was right up there with anything Square put out for the Super Nintendo. Camelot's work on the Shining Force games. Now, anyone who knows me knows I love the Shining Force games to death. They had a strong emphasis on strategy gameplay, not so much like Ogre Battle. It was a little more streamlined. Think basic Final Fantasy Tactics, without like the height variables and stuff like that. Just really quick, strategic gameplay, fantastic levels of charm. The music was out of this world good. These games are classics. I mean, there's a reason that they had to, make Shining Force 3 in 3 parts on the Saturn. They really were epic, and they deserve that much attention. And they were killer games. Shadowrun on the Genesis. I know Burt will agree with me there.
Yeah, that I've had a long-term love affair with that particular intellectual property, and Shadowrun franchise has gotten a shameful amount of money from me in my lifetime. And the Genesis was no exception. That was one of those things where, well, I think I'll squirrel away some lunch money for about 3 months, and then I'll have enough to actually go out and buy that game. And I played that into the ground.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's interesting because the Genesis version is vastly different from the one that they released on the Super Nintendo.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I remember in the Super Nintendo one, you wake up in the damn morgue.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the Genesis one, it was completely different. And I remember back when both came out, it simply was a matter of, well, if it's going to be on both consoles, it's going to be the same port. There isn't going to be really a lot of difference. And they really went out of their way to make 2 different games. I've still never gotten a chance to play the Super Nintendo one, but that'll have to be a goal. Maybe see if I can emulate that sometime. But the Shadowrun version was amazing.
The thing about the Super Nintendo version, I mean, it's got the 3/4 overhead perspective. It's got the isometric viewpoint. It plays a little more stiffly. I wasn't real crazy about the controls. Really, the atmosphere is all over the place. It doesn't have that consistent cyberpunk tone that you kind of got from the Genesis version. Really, I wasn't that crazy about it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
I feel that there was a. I'm sorry, Trevor?
I would say I've tried playing it on emulator, and I agree. The controls are pretty bad, and it's a very unforgiving game.
Yeah. Really, the Super Nintendo RPG library, this is a personal preference, but why the hell does every game look like an Easter basket? Jesus Christ, that color palette. Look at Secret of Mana and try not to throw up. Sure, it looks good, but it looks peeps good. Okay.
Yeah, well, see, the Super Nintendo could display 256 colors on screen, whereas the Genesis could only display 56.
Right.
Or 54, something like that.
64, I believe.
64, yeah.
If you take a look overseas and take a look at the Shin Megami Tensei games for the Super Nintendo, which are like 4 games, the first 2 and 2 spin-off games.
Yeah, I believe it was If, and what was the other one?
1, 2 got released, and Soul Hackers.
Soul Hackers, right.
which is getting a remake for a 3DS right now.
But yeah, they look a lot grittier than the rest, the Super Nintendo entries. They looked pretty good. But really, I don't know. I don't get me wrong. I enjoy the Super Nintendo's RPG library. I really do. But I just hate when people say that the Genesis didn't have anything in that department. Because really, if you knew where to look, it had some excellent games.
Yeah.
And not only Shadowrun from that RPG perspective, and you had touched on Phantasy Star 4. Generations of Doom was actually very different insofar as any other game I had played to that point because of what happened insofar as choices. You got through Act 1 of the game, and you had to decide whether or not you were going to marry one princess or the other. And depending on who you picked, it affected the storyline and who ended up in your parties, because your descendants would be different. And then at the end of Act 2, you had to do it again. So there were 4 different endings you could get from that. And I remember thinking to myself, did Nintendo ever do anything like that on the 8-bit system? And the answer I came back with was no. Right. And, the Genesis console really did do a lot to push the RPG franchise. When you look at it from that end, all of a sudden games went from being that long hallway procedural that we talked about in Final Fantasy 13 to something where you could actually have tangibly different things happen to you because you chose things differently.
Right. Now, talking about pushing boundaries in Sega, another thing that I really just can't, say enough is I really like the way that Sega, Nintendo tried to play it safe a lot of the time. They had their system, they had their game plan, and they did a great job. But Sega was never content with that. Now, a lot of people, they knock them for it. They kind of went in 50 different directions. But I think they came up with some pretty cool add-ons. They weren't afraid to test the waters and try to get a larger market share. And they did some really innovative stuff. One thing I was crazy about back in the day, I'm not sure how many of you guys used it, but the Sega Channel. Does anyone remember that?
I didn't hear about that until years after I owned a Genesis, so I never really got a chance to use it.
I remember that it wasn't available in my area for whatever reason. I had heard about it, but it was one of those things, don't need it. Having fun with what I have now. Never got a chance to use it.
When I got my Genesis, it was sadly already discontinued.
Did they have it in Europe?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, basically the deal was you'd get in touch with your cable provider, they'd ship you out a box, and it was essentially kind of like a cable modem that you would plug into your Genesis cartridge slot, and then you'd plug in your cable connection, and you would actually get 50 games a month on a random menu that would change monthly. There were test drives of beta games that weren't out yet. Games from every genre, contests, challenges. It was an awesome service. And so, I mean, I'm sorry?
That sounds like a precursor to OnLive.
Oh, absolutely. That's pretty much what it was. Even some games that never made it to the States were available on Sega Channel. Like, one that really sticks out to me was Mega Man The Wily Wars, which was Mega Man 1, 2, and 3 in one cartridge. Phenomenal game. Made it to Europe, made it to Japan, but we didn't get it over here because of a deal that Nintendo had with Capcom.
You guys did actually get it in Brazil. You could get it. You needed to import it from Brazil, but it got released in your region.
Right. But yeah, I mean, the Sega Channel was awesome. 32X, innovative. I mean, it was a hell of an idea. I know that it was kind of just, something that was it was cumbersome. Yes.
Well, the thing that always got me about that was we had talked, I think a little bit before we had started the podcast, we had talked about the big blocky first edition. Or actually, no, that did come up earlier in the recording. If you had that version, you had the Sega CD that would stack under the bottom of it. Then you had the 32X, which would go on the top. And before you knew it, you had this towering fire hazard with 3 of those big, huge, to the red hot stage power adapters that are plugged in behind, all of the stuff that was in your entertainment system. So you kind of had to keep an eye on it, wonder whether or not you were going to have to call your insurance company for, a burned down house because you were playing video games for 4 hours.
Yeah.
But that's cool.
That makes it
Sega
awesome.
had edge and attitude.
Yeah, it's like a Voltron of video games.
That's right.
Yeah, it was definitely awesome. And, if you really wanted to get truly ridiculous about it, cram your Jane Genie in it, then put Sonic and Knuckles on top of it, to see how high you can get that bad boy to go.
Plug your Sega channel adapter into that. I am one of, as we talked about in the last podcast, I'm one of the 3 people who actually enjoyed my 32X. I didn't have a PC until 1998, and I thought Doom was passable. I really did. Sure, you didn't get all 8 angles of the sprites. They were always facing you all the time. But, whatever. I don't play Doom for stealth. I play Doom for the killing. And
There's stealth.
Killing was good. I'm sorry?
There's stealth in Doom.
Exactly. So if they're always looking at me, it wasn't a big deal.
Version, you were failing.
Yeah.
Get out there and chainsaw that demon right in its face.
Exactly. If the face is always looking at you, it's just a bonus. More face shooting.
The 32X version didn't have music, did it?
Oh, yes, the Jaguar did not.
Oh.
There wasn't enough room on the cartridge, but the 32X version did have music, albeit it was very tinny, but it was, whatever, it was good. I enjoyed it.
It was kind of tinny back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Virtua Fighter was passable.
That was one of the...
All in all, I mean... Yeah, Trevor?
The Virtua Fighter, I think, is the only game I've ever played on an actual 32X, and it was fun, because it was like one of the first 3D fighters out there.
Absolutely. Then the Sega CD, Sewer Shark. You can trash it all you want, and I'm 110% behind you. But games like, Lunar, Vi...
Lunar was great.
Oh, it's 2 of the best games I've ever played in my life.
I actually do have a Sega CD. It's not functional right now. I got to figure out what's wrong with it. But I actually still own 3 games for it. I have Sonic CD, NBA Jam, and Popful Mail.
Popful Mail is fantastic.
Yes, I love the humor in Popful Mail. I wish I could do a Let's Play of it because it's just awesome game.
Something to think about, definitely. But all in all, they really weren't afraid to push the boundaries and bring out new stuff. And sure, I mean, at our expense, we probably tossed a lot of money out that we might not have wanted to at the time, but they were always trying something new. And I don't know, I can't think of a time that was more exciting than the early 90s to be a Sega fan, because it seemed like there was always some new project they were working on that was just going to be awesome and blow your mind. And it didn't always pan out the way you wanted it to, but I'll be damned if they didn't keep you on your toes.
But after all of the years of being shit on as a Master System owner, it was good to be a Sega kid after that.
Oh,
all of a
God.
sudden you had a system that your friends actually had cartridges that they could trade with you. I think I could count on the fingers of one hand the people I knew who had Master Systems growing up. But when you got Genesis, everybody had one. Right. And, all of a sudden you could actually play a whole ton of games, which if, you were kind of sitting there with your Master System playing, 3D Space Harrier on it with really, really chunky, blocky graphics that, threatened to give you epilepsy, this was a step up.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
And also, speaking of Sega Genesis add-ons, I think a lot of people actually don't know about this, but there's another add-on that doesn't really get mentioned, and it's called the Power Base Converter, and it basically makes it so you can play master games on your Sega Genesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember I had that mostly because I wanted to keep playing Choplifter.
But really, I think the main reason you don't hear about that very much is because it was nearly impossible to find Master System games in stores by the time the Genesis was out, unless you lived in Brazil.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then there was the fact that if you got all of those other add-ons, like the instant you got a 32X, nope, that's not going to plug in anymore. That was not a part of the Tower of Power.
Right.
And
there's nothing more beautiful than seeing those 5 AC adapters lined up, right?
Threatening to burn your house down.
there also was another add-on for the Genesis. It was called the X-Band, which was so you could play online with your Genesis over your phone cord.
Right, the X-Band modem. I do remember that. I remember Primal Rage was a pretty big hit on that, if I remember correctly.
You could actually play
the
that.
Street Fighter 2 version was pretty big.
They had that online?
Yeah, Super Street Fighter 2.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's
go ahead.
It's the reason why the WiiWare version of it also got online. Because normally the versions on WiiWare don't get online mode. But Capcom did go to Nintendo and said, look there, we back then had online mode, so we want it now too. And it worked out for them.
Now, the X-Band owners were the big timers back then because standard long-distance charges did apply for every minute you used the service.
Yeah, that's true. That was back before we really had like internet providers, and it was just a, another long distance service.
Right, so you're paying 10 cents a minute for a game of Madden or whatever. I mean, you can see how that would probably add up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, the add-on peripheral that I had that I had that it always felt kind of unique. They didn't really support it all that great was the Menacer. And really the only reason to pick up the Menacer was if you wanted to play Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
That's the reason I got mine.
Yep. Because otherwise, I mean, all you're looking at is playing the Toe Jam and Earl shooter game, which probably not the best game, though kind of amusing.
There is nothing wrong with Ready Aim Tomatoes, good sir. Aside from everything.
But there were like 5 other titles that were on there, and I mean, really, honestly, Menacer just should have come packaged with Toe Jam and Earl Ready Aim Tomatoes.
Right.
But I mean, like you'd said, you bought it because you wanted to play Terminator 2, and then nothing happened. But it was one of the coolest light gun attachments ever, because one of the things that sucked about playing Duck Hunt or Hogan's Alley was sitting there, arms stretched out in front of you, and eventually realizing that you could no longer hold those bad boys up, because despite the fact that it was a very light gun, your arms were very tired. The Menacer actually had a stock option, which you could kind of settle in with, and it made it a lot easier to kind of aim and to be able to play for longer periods of time. And then there was the dippy scope that made absolutely no sense. No idea what they were thinking with that.
It looks cool.
Yeah, it was
that
actually
had to have been it.
It was a binocular at that, without lenses. It definitely had 2 eyepieces, if I remember correctly, and that's just...
You're right, and it was dumb as hell. it's enhanced playing experience. It's just another piece of cheap molded plastic from China. Thanks, Sega.
Exactly. Thank you very much. But guys, there was, I'm sure Marius might have heard of this, but there is actually a really, really good PAL version shooter that was supported the Menacer called Body Count. And if you've never heard of it, look into it. Really frantic shooter, cool theme where aliens invade and you blast them all to hell. You've seen it a million times, but it had nice gritty visual style. The gunplay was fast. It kind of looked reminiscent of... Did anyone play Alien Storm before?
Yes.
The first-person segments of that.
Oh, cool.
It was pretty rad. Yeah.
Ultimately, my ardent wish for the Menacer was that they were going to release Steel Gunner as a Genesis.
I had that same wish.
Right into that Nirvana zone. To this day, it's one of my favorite arcade games.
It is a good one. I love going to the airport and just blasting out every single window and every background item. I mean,
that was
the pure carnage is awesome.
Destructible environment, and I was like, "There's other targets to shoot." No, I'm going to go accuracy rating. This is awesome.
Right. Now, how about developers? I mean, Sega had some of their own development teams that we didn't see doing a lot of games for Nintendo that were pretty phenomenal, like Treasure, for instance. They put out some stellar games, and they really seem to take advantage of the Genesis hardware. Gunstar Heroes, I mean, I guess the closest comparison you probably have is Contra 3 on the Super Nintendo, but man, that game was fast-paced.
Yeah, Gunstar, and it looks amazing. Like the things they did, like some of the enemies are made of like all these different sprites, and the way it moves is like something you don't really see in any other Genesis game. Right.
The pacing was bleeding fast too. All I can think about is when you're riding the rails in the second stage and it starts to pick up speed, it gets insane after a while. You see trains flying by, explosions, bombs going everywhere. It's chaos and it's awesome. And you didn't really see a lot of games on the Super Nintendo pick up that kind of speed. Right. But Treasure really seemed to know how to harness the power of the Genesis and do some special stuff with it.
Blast processing,
exactly.
Who was the publisher who put out Zero Tolerance?
That was Technopop, I want to say.
Because that, I remember, that kind of baked my brain playing that the first time, because it was actually, if I remember correctly, it was kind of a kludgy way to do a Wolfenstein-type game, but I remember it was the only game on Genesis that you could play that would do that, barring plugging in a 32X or maybe a Sega CD. Ow. But it was Doom-style play on a cart, which I remember not having seen on anything but PCs, playing Wolfenstein and Doom at that time. And like I said, it was a little kludgy, but it was also really, really fun.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you actually had multiple members on your team you could play with, and they all had slightly different stats. Nothing really major, but I mean, supposedly there was a difference. I don't know. Also, I do remember. I'm not sure how far you played into Zero Tolerance, but I know after you get off the space station and you go on the high rise, it's like the game has a revelation. Everything has changed now because you start at the tip top of this burning high rise, and you work you work your way down to the middle floors, which are just engulfed in flames, all the way to the sub basement. And I'm talking dozens and dozens and dozens of floors. And there's the stage doesn't end until you get to the very bottom. It's awesome. I mean, really, it pulled you into the world the best way it could anyway. And that was Technopop, by the way. The wiki gods have spoken.
Yeah.
Did you guys know Game Freaks also made games for the Genesis?
Game Freak, like you guys who did
which
Pokemon?
made Pokemon, yeah.
Huh.
Most of the games weren't available in the US only via Sega channel. There is a game, it's named Pulseman. Which, do you know it?
Yeah, I've seen Pulseman before.
Yeah. They actually got inspired by Pulseman to create Pikachu's a Volt Tackle attack.
Wait, what was it?
They got inspired by a attack from Pulseman for the Volt Tackle from Pikachu.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. That's awesome. But Zero Tolerance actually got a sequel too. It wasn't released. Really? Yeah, you can find the ROM floating around the internet. It's very similar. More buggy aliens. Definitely, if you like the first one, you'll probably enjoy it.
I'll have to check that out. I've been meaning to look into kind of the emulation stuff insofar as that. I'm actually, you know what? I imagine you can probably get really cheap Genesis controllers USB. And I've got some gift card money floating around. I might have to look into that and start playing a few. I've only got a few of the converted games. Although one of those games is Zombies Ate My Neighbors, which was
awesome, pretty
awesome.
Yeah, and another knock against the Super Nintendo here being we're all Genesis fans tonight, at least till the next podcast. And the Super Nintendo did get a pseudo sequel to Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and it was Ghoul Patrol, and it fucking sucked.
You were lied to by your album covers, huh?
Oh, it was atrocious. Oh my god. They took everything that was great about Zombies Ate My Neighbors and they just completely castrated it. It is god awful. If you ever see Ghoul Patrol, piss on it. Throw it at a wall. Feed it to your cat. I don't know. Just don't play it. Don't put it in your Super Nintendo. Do not rape that piece of plastic.
And do all that in a store.
Yes.
The crowd went mild.
Wait, I was actually looking. There is a website called retrousb.com.
Yes.
And they make USB adapters for classic controllers. It's USB on one end, and it's whatever controller, like say Sega Genesis controller input on the other end, or NES or Super Nintendo or N64, anything like that. They're a little pricey. Like I'm looking here at the Genesis one, and it's $21.
Yeah, I see it. Huh. Interesting.
All told, if you're playing a lot of emulation, that's really not bad.
Yeah, when you consider all the time that you're going to be spending on revisiting your childhood playing these games, it's one of those $21 to get that. Yeah. All right, I might bite.
Yeah, I will say though that if you don't have that, a wired Xbox controller still does do the job pretty damn well.
Right. Now we've gone over a few things here. Now, what do you think? All told, what were some of the best games for the system that you couldn't find anywhere else?
I would actually say the one I had the most trouble finding was Sonic 3.
Yeah?
Like you can find all, Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 1, Sonic 2 everywhere, but it took me 3 years to finally get a hold of a copy of Sonic 3.
No kidding.
Other than that, my favorite series, that I wish would make a comeback, is the Road Rash series. I freaking love Road Rash. Road Rash 3 is the best. Had the best music, tons of weapons, everything. I just
Pop quiz hotshot 15S9PU03. What am I talking about?
Wait, what?
15S9PU03.
Oh, is that the
super bike, man?
Yeah, that's super bike.
And then there was a cousin to Road Rash, a very poor cousin indeed. It was one of those games where you had the terrible graphics but amazing gameplay and soundtrack. and I think that was a Sega exclusive. I'm not certain.
It was.
But between having an audio track named Spicy
Placenta, yes.
and the fact that you could be thrown off of a car, because what Skitchin was, for those who had never played it, was a rollerblading game where your job was to catch on to cars and see how long you could get away with it.
And it was great because you could hang from cars and you could see rollerbladers get hurt. I mean, it had everything you need.
And if you got more than one rollerblader on the back of the car, they would like whip out chains and crowbars on each other. If you weren't ducking and staying out of the rearview mirror, granny drivers would either slow down and make you stop, or they'd pop the trunk and it would basically slam you in the face and knock you off the car.
That's awesome.
I'm pretty sure the game took place in Wilmington.
I would not be surprised.
Oh, man.
I remember the big thing was the way to make big bucks in the game was to sketch on the back of cop cars, which was risky. If they saw you, they'd pull you over and they'd fine you and you'd lose all of your money. But for every second you could hold on to a cop car, you got $100.
I'm hopping on cop cars first thing when I wake up.
Shit, yeah.
Awesome. I don't know. I was always big on the Streets of Rage games. I thought that those were phenomenal. I mean, growing up as a kid, loving the arcades in the 80s, Double Dragon was one of my favorite games of all time. Until Final Fight knocked the shit out of it. But, you know, I got Streets of Rage 1 for my birthday in 1991. And it was just unreal. I mean, Yuzo Koshiro's soundtrack was amazing. I'd never heard anything like it before.
The funny part about Streets of Rage in my case was I didn't pick it up until it was on the combo disc for the CD.
Really?
Yeah, the original Sega CD came packaged with a whole bunch of music tracks and stuff like that. But amongst other things, it had Streets of Rage 1 bundled in with Golden Axe, Columns, and there was another one. I can't remember which one it was. Surprisingly, not a Sonic one.
Was it the Sherlock Holmes game for the Sega CD?
Nah, I don't think that one came packaged. Did it? I'll have to look that up. But Streets of Rage for Genesis, I mean, I caught on to it late, but it was one of those, this was around all this? Where has it been all my life?
Trevor?
I still have a copy of Streets of Rage 2 for my Sega Genesis. It's one of the first games I bought for the Sega Genesis.
It doesn't get any better than Streets of Rage 2. 3 was great. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was cool. You know, they got Yuzo went for a more experimental soundtrack. I know it's funny to talk about the music before the gameplay here, but really with Streets of Rage, it's perfectly acceptable, okay? But I don't know. They implemented the dash. That was cool. Weapons got health bars. That's okay, I guess. I like to spam the hell out of a lead pipe. But I think the difficulty was batshit crazy, at least in the US version. It makes it hard to enjoy.
It was really, really hard.
Yeah, it was pretty much borderline impossible. I don't know how I beat it as a plucky 8-year-old, but it wasn't so much happening. At least recently in the past 2 years, crazy ass cracker for the forums, and I've tried many times, and we get nowhere. We're lucky to get to stage 5.
Wow,
it's pathetic. Yeah.
So, what are you guys thinking about the Shinobi games, which are also on the Genesis exclusive list?
Shinobi 3 is probably one of the best games ever made, I want to say.
Shinobi was good times.
I never actually played much, but I have played a little bit of Shinobi 3, and I really, really liked it.
There are actually 3 different versions of Shinobi which are censored. In one version, you fight against Spider-Man and Batman.
Right.
And in another version, you only fight against Batman and some spider.
And there's also Godzilla, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the Incredible Hulk. And they were all taken out of subsequent versions as well.
They couldn't fit Chuck Norris onto a 16-bit cart.
No. Chuck Norris is actually the reason they made the 32X. But then due to a licensing dispute, you know, the game was never made. But
the opening was going to be him slamming a revolving door.
The Genesis Sega CD 32X obelisk was actually constructed from schematics we actually found under the Sphinx, and it was actually to make a device that could actually render a sprite of Chuck Norris. But
now that you've described it as the Mega Obelisk, all I'm going to see from now on is the apes from 2001 beating the hell out of it with bones.
The problem with
Thanks,
the Genesis,
Frank.
the problem
as
with
well
Chuck,
you should.
The problem with Chuck Norris on the Genesis was all TV screens would burst if the screen got on.
Oh man, we got to stop with the Chuck Norris things. We could go forever with this.
Yeah.
All right, so all in all, guys, what do you think of the legacy of the Genesis? What do you think it's cemented for Sega in the era, the 16-bit era?
It was if you were to ask me, to be perfectly honest, that was the golden age for Sega, because everything that happened after that was either something that took off in another region of the world outside of North America, or just utterly flopped and there was no support for it. Like
Right.
32X, that was hot for maybe about a couple of months. And then after that, it cooled down. Very few games came out for it. Then they released the Saturn, and Saturn really tried to hang in there, but it just wasn't cutting it no matter how Panzer Dragoon it was.
Right.
That was their one big thing, and then everything else kind of flopped for it. And their last hurrah was the Dreamcast, which I remember being absolutely amazing, and then that flopped within 2 years. So Genesis was really kind of it was the point where Fonzie jumps the shark.
Yeah.
You know, you had all of the really good stuff going on there for it, and everybody had one. Like I said, it was ubiquitous. You couldn't swing a cat by the tail without hitting one, and it really it kind of is in many ways their showcase system. You kind of look back at it and say, you know, this was it. This was the peak of where it's at, because aside from arcade consoles now and the occasional port out to another system, they're really not in it for the hardware game anymore.
Right.
Right.
It was really kind of a defining time for them insofar as what they were looking to do and their identity.
Yeah, and that was also kind of what did them in as well. I mean, the just gargantuan amount of money they spent with Sega R&D putting out all these different platforms. Really, it put them in a tough spot when the Saturn really didn't do what they wanted it to do. They were hurting. I mean, the Dreamcast was really their last bet. And I
remember Dreamcast blew our minds. I was in college at the time, and we got into Kirkbride Hall at University of Delaware, and we hooked the Dreamcast up to a projector in an auditorium lecture hall.
Oh man.
People had to leave because they were getting motion sickness at Sonic Adventure. That shit was impressive, but it didn't matter how hardcore the processing power was. The developers weren't lining up to make games for it, and Americans simply were not interested. Everybody was looking at the PlayStation and going, "Ooh, what's that? There's zombies on this. I like that."
No, more like there are DVDs on that one.
Yeah, the DVD player was a huge seller for the PlayStation too. That combined with the very deceptive ads for the emotion engine that Sony was putting out that were just CG mock-ups. I mean, they really shot Sega in the foot there. People bought Sony's story hook, line, and sinker, and when the PlayStation 2 came out with the fantastic Fantavision fireworks simulator, it was already too late for Sega. People were eager to gobble up their cheapest DVD player at the time and enjoy their new PlayStation. And it kind of left Sega in the dust.
So, do you guys know why the Mega Drive isn't named Mega Drive in the US?
No, why is that?
It's because of a washing machine company is named Mega Drive, and they had the rights for the name. So Sega needed to decide another name for the system, and it was Genesis.
Well, you know, if Sega were smart, they would have partnered with the company that put out the Mega Drive and just made that another expansion for the Genesis.
16-bit washing action.
Yeah, but see, you could only clean 64 colors, so people are pretty finicky.
Yeah, and you wouldn't need a cleaning cartridge like on Nintendo. Sega does, but Nintendo don't.
That shit was just squeaky clean all the time. Just toss in about a quarter of a cup of cheer and go crazy.
Exactly.
Okay, Trevor, what do you think of what did the Genesis say for Sega in the 16-bit era?
I have to agree that it really is the golden age. You know, I don't think Sega could have done anything wrong in the Genesis era, and I think they got a little unfocused whenever they started to try and make, you know, the 32X and the Sega CD, and you know the Sega Saturn has an awesome 2D processor, and they kind of skimped on the 3D processor. And then, you know, Sony took advantage of that with their PlayStation. They're like, you know, 3D is the future. we're gonna make ours, more powerful 3D system. And then Sega was like, 3D is not gonna take off like that. But the rest is history.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to agree. Marius?
I agree too.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. This was the golden age of 16-bit entertainment.
Yes.
Excellent.
So
do you want to lead in the TGS stuff, Marius?
Yeah. So we had TGS this week, and there were quite a few new trailers and new announcements. So to get started with the Ace Attorney 5 trailer, it showed a new emotion system for the game where you can test the emotion of your attendees to see why they did commit those crimes.
So is that an expansion of like the lock system and one of the other, like if you ask them a question, all of a sudden all these locks appear where, if they have a secret or something?
Yeah,
Right.
something like that. You can just test how they react to a question, and if they are angry, then they maybe hate lawyers, like in the trailer. So we had Metal Gear Rising, and it's a new Metal Gear game, not on stealth, but more on destruction. You can cut everything up, really everything in the game, like every tree, every wall. You can destroy everything, and you can cut it in every direction, and it lies forever on the ground until you leave the area.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed by that when I watched the trailer. That because most games they'll have like certain points that are breakable points on whatever model of the thing that you're cutting, and if you slash at it, it'll still cut at the same exact point every time. But this one actually does take into account where your sword hits, and that's pretty awesome.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Platinum Games can do no wrong. I mean, I loved Bayonetta. I loved Mad World. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with Rising. But at the same time, I'm still not sure if I'm sold on seeing an all-out action Metal Gear game.
Personally, I'm not sold because I've never really been a Metal Gear fan. But that's just me.
Well, I mean, one thing they have is, typically Platinum Games is completely batshit crazy, and Kojima's completely batshit crazy. I mean, anyone who's played Metal Gear Solid 2 knows that. So it could be a match made in heaven. I mean, if you want a completely incoherent game with badass characters, then have at it. I mean, it's going to be awesome. They'll definitely be good for it.
So we had two other trailers from Phantasy Star Online 2. One trailer is for the Vita version and one is for the smartphone version. The Vita version is actually exactly the same as the PC version, only portable, and you can only play it if you're connected to the internet. So you can't take it with you on the bus if you don't have the 3G model. And the smartphone version, you can actually log in with your character, but you can't connect to the server, and you can only collect items for the game. So you have some health potions, which you can get mini games for the main game. Do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I was actually wondering, is the Vita version going to have cross-platform play with the PC version?
Yeah, you can connect to the same servers as everybody else plays on the PC one.
That's
and
fantastic.
You can use the same account on which you log in at the PC.
Okay, see, that's great. That's really good news.
And there was another Ace Attorney trailer, this time for Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney. And in this game, you actually switch between Professor Layton and Ace Attorney. The playstyles are completely different. One time you need to talk with Laytons and other people from the city about what happened and need to get information out of them. And on the other side, you need to do some quiz and, well, stuff Layton does. Just crazy quiz time. And you need to find out who stole something in this kingdom. Yeah, and then there was an announcement for a Hatsune Miku social game for the iPhone and iPads. And it's another social game, like Farmville. In some kind, you're the manager of Hatsune Miku. If you don't know who the Hatsune Miku is a virtual pop star. You can imagine the games something like Theater from Final Fantasy. So, Hyperdimension Neptunia V got confirmed to be released in Europe and the US under the name Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. And it's going to be published by NAS America. And we had one last trailer for Digimon Adventure, which is going to be focusing on the first 2 seasons of the TV series and on the first movie. It's going to be a pretty nostalgic game. So if you're a fan of those old games, go and check out all the trailers on mushroomtomatoes.com. So, do you guys have anything to say about the news? Anything
Really,
else?
I can't wait for Fantasy Star Online too. That's going to be phenomenal. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was telling me he just could not believe how awful the first Fantasy Star Online was. And after I brutally murdered him, I realized that I really missed the game a great deal. And seeing this on the Vita, I mean, I can't wait. That sounds awesome.
The PC version is actually free to play. You should check it out. There's already a fan translation out there, which you can just price, and there you go. You have a free English version, and you don't need to wait until spring next year.
Now, was this confirmed for the US?
The Vita version was not, but C version is confirmed.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'll definitely be checking out the PC version. I think I have a friend who already has the free version that's available now, and he's trying to get me into it. But I actually didn't know about the English patch until we recorded this, so I might be checking out that sometime this weekend.
Yeah, I send you later the link for the patch.
Okay.
So I guess we're coming up to the tail end here. We're gonna do a what you playing real quick. Trevor, what you been into, man?
Isn't it obvious? Borderlands 2.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Yep. Same here. That and actually Xenoblade Chronicles. I've put a great deal of time into that. In fact, I picked up Borderlands after work yesterday and still didn't manage to play it until about 11 o'clock because Xenoblade Chronicles is progressively from the start up until the 13-hour mark that I'm at right now, proceeded to get more amazing by the minute. It's just ridiculous. The narrative is unlike any other RPG I've played in recent memory. The graphics, I mean, they're very last gen, at least because of the hardware limitations. But that aside, the art direction is stellar. It definitely makes you wish it was on a more powerful console, but even still, I mean, I've been completely pulled into the world, and for a Wii game, that's saying something, at least for me. I'm getting a great deal of enjoyment out of it, and I would not hesitate to say it's probably the best JRPG I've played in years.
Like the Wii still got some fight in it.
For 2 more months, yeah. How about you, Marius?
So I've been replaying Ace Attorney after I've been hyped from the TGS. I just needed to replay the first one. I have the iPad version and right now at the last case. And
is that the one with the twins, just like in the original DS version?
Twins?
Yeah.
Sisters.
The sisters, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
No. The murders, the 2 murders happening at once with the twins. Wasn't it the first Ace Attorney? Last case?
The last case, but it wasn't twins. I don't really remember right now.
Or 2 murders that happened simultaneously, I thought. I don't know. It's been years and years and years. Parking garage, not ringing a bell?
Yeah, parking garage.
Okay.
With cowboy. Chief.
It's been a long time. My version sounds more interesting.
Okay, then I'm still playing Pokemon Black 2. Pretty interesting game. I'm now the 6th batch, and I'm nearing the end of the game. I'm collecting every Pokemon I can on the way. I want to collect every single one this time.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah.
Coffee!
And then I've been not playing, but watching the last episode, or true ending episode, which just got released for Persona 4 the animation, which is an anime version of Persona 4.
Wait, what? When did this come out? Does it have an English dub? Tell me now. Lives depend on it.
It has subtitles.
Gotcha.
And they completely redo the ending. You know, the one with Izanagi. I don't want...
I haven't beaten Persona 4 yet, sir.
It's just the name of someone which you don't hear at all if you're not going for the true ending. But they completely reworked the ending, but it's so much better. And there was a fight with another character, which was just a bonus fight after you have completed the game 2 times, and they worked that fight into the story, and it's just amazing. You need to check
I will.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to track this down. If you could maybe link me to where it's available, I'll have to pick it up. Awesome.
So that's all I've been playing.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming and checking out the podcast. We're going to conclude the second episode of the HeyPoorPodcast. We're now available on iTunes, so look us up. Also follow us on Twitter at HeyPoorPlayer. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys next time.
Good night, Internet.
Good night, everybody.